My recipe for the Rochester Priory flan is available free on my Buy Me a Coffee page. Instead of making a charge for the recipe, I'm asking that you donate to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal run by the Disasters Emergency Committee. The link is provided in the video description below. Thank you. The servants of the medieval Cathedral Priory of St Andrews, Rochester, received both wages and daily food as part of their remuneration. The master miller, who was also the chief baker, responsible for making the best and finest bread for the monastery, received a special food gift at Easter in recognition of his important role in the community. That gift was a flawn, or in Latin, flaco. Today, we can translate this as a flan. Magiste pistorum habebit. The master of the millers will have 1 monk's loaf and at Easter time a flan. His wages 7 shillings. Stipendium eos septem solidi. The significance of the flan at Easter is that it marked the end of Lent, when the flan's ingredients of dairy and eggs were prohibited. Flans were made during Lent, but almond milk and a thickener such as wheat starch or rice flour was substituted. We don't know exactly what went into the Rochester Priory flan. A record from the monks of St Augustine's Priory in Canterbury shows that eggs and cheese went into their flans. However, medieval flan recipes are often just simple egg custard tarts sweetened with sugar, though there are also more elaborate versions containing dried and/or fresh fruits. For my Rochester flan, I'm using a sweet egg custard flan recipe that dates to about 1435, but I brought in a few ideas from other medieval recipes just to give it that extra little something. The pastry that would have been used in the medieval period would have either have been a flour and water based pastry or a flour and egg yolk or egg based pastry. And then sometimes they coloured it with saffron and sweetened it with sugar as well. What I've done is actually use a modern short crust pastry, so it does have butter in, but I've also put the saffron in and a little bit of sugar too, just to sweeten the pastry. I'm going to use the modern method of baking the pastry blind. Medieval cooks also baked their pastry cases first before adding the filling. So a bit of parchment paper and then weight it down with some pastry beans. And that's going to go in the oven now. To make the custard part of the flan, I'm going to use 6 egg yolks. These are medium eggs. I'm actually going to pass them through the sieve. I'm doing this because in the medieval recipe, it says to draw the eggs through a strainer, and they did this instead of beating their eggs. And it makes it lovely and smooth, so I'm going to follow the medieval method here. It says to do it with milk, and I'm going to use 250 millilitres of milk. I've got semi-skimmed here. You can use whole milk. In fact, whole milk might taste that much more creamy. That helps the egg yolks go through a bit. So I'm going to use 250 ml of cream as well. Make it nice and rich. And that's worked all the egg yolks through. Give that a nice stir. To this I'm going to add 75 grams of light muscovado sugar. I'm going to try and dissolve that. It will dissolve eventually if you keep stirring. I'm using a darker sugar because in the recipe that I'm working from, it says you can use either white sugar or black sugar. And the word black really means in this context a brown sugar. That is unrefined cane sugar. I'm going to add, as the recipe says, some salt. So just a pinch of sea salt here, and I'm grinding in my fingers to make it dissolve more easily. I don't want it very salty. I'm also going to add something that isn't in this particular recipe, but it is in other flan recipes, and that's saffron. And what I did here was grind the saffron in a mortar and then just add a tablespoon of milk. And that's going to go in. I used about a dozen strands of saffron. I think this just gives it a nicer colour. Doesn't change the colour hugely, but it just gives it a bit of a golden glow. The final ingredient for the custard is melted butter, and that's in the original recipe. So I'm just using there 30 grams. That's just a little more than an ounce.
I use unsalted butter.
I'm going to give that a whisk. Not all flan recipes have melted butter in them, but there are quite a number that do. And I thought I'd leave that in the recipe rather than take it out, because it kind of gives it a medieval flavour profile and texture. Okay, that's nicely done there. So I've got my baked flan case, my baked pastry case out of the oven. That was baked for about 10 minutes with the paper in it, and then I took the paper out and left it to bake another 10 to 12 minutes, and it leaves it fairly hard, which is what it's supposed to be. And then this mixture is going to get poured in.
I suggest transporting and baking the flan on a grill pan. You're less likely to spill the filling that way, and the grill pan serves as a cooling rack once the flan is baked.
So that's my flan done, and as you can see, it's just got a bit of a wobble, which is what you should be looking for. It's quite a soft set custard. It took about 35 minutes for it to bake, and now I'm going to sprinkle on some sugar and cinnamon mix. In the main recipe that I've been following, it's just white sugar that's sprinkled on the top. But I saw another recipe that had sugar and cinnamon, so I thought I'd go for that just to give it a bit of extra flavour, a bit of extra spiciness. So I'm just going to dredge the flan with the sugar and the cinnamon. I did a tablespoonful of golden castor sugar and half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and then just mix that up. Right, I'm going to let that cool now, and probably will take at least half an hour to cool, and then I'm going to try and cut it into slices and serve it and eat it.
It's easier to cut if you chill it in the fridge for an hour or so. Now it's time for tasting.
Silky smooth custard. Really lovely. The fact that there's brown sugar in the filling gives this background toffee flavour. It's lovely. And I really love the cinnamon and sugar sprinkled on the top. It just gives it a different dimension. Absolutely delicious.
Just a reminder that you can donate to the Ukraine humanitarian appeal by following the link in the video description below.
So after the rigours of Lent, I can't think of a better way of celebrating Easter than with the Rochester Priory Flan.